What techniques should you use to catch fish in super shallow water? We're going to talk about that.
Welcome back to another episode of 5-Minute Fish Talk.
Unfortunately, I already finished my coffee, but I do have 5 minutes on this time here, and you know what that means. Boop! It's time to get real. We're talking about fish in super shallow water today. That's right. As we all know, bass love positioning in shallow water. Obviously, there's times of the year where they're going to go out deep, but there's generally speaking always a group of fish up shallow. So here's the deal. I want to talk about how to catch those fish. And when I say up shallow, I'm talking about super shallow. I'm talking about less than a foot of water, people. These are weird conditions, but they do happen, and I found myself in these conditions multiple times. You cast up basically on the bank and you're catching fish as soon as it hits the water. These fish are in 6 inches of water. These fish, their backs might be sticking out of the water. There's numerous reasons why they might be up there, but 90% of the time it's because there is some sort of forage up there. Probably could be something like bluegill beds. It could be something like the shad just getting pushed up super shallow. Whatever it may be, it doesn't really matter. What it comes down to is if you find yourself in those situations, you want to be able to catch those fish. And the thing is numerous baits on the market today really do not do a great job of presenting in super shallow water. So what I wanted to talk about are the baits that I've found do work very well in these conditions, and that way when you find yourself in this position, you're going to go out there and blast on some big ones. So without further ado, one of the main things that I really want to look for here is something that's going to be presented in the shallow water and stay in the strike zone as long as possible. But what I mean by that is essentially I don't want to throw something like a chatterbait up there because you basically rip it out of the shallow water within 2 winds of the reel. I want something that once it hits the water, it can stay there as long as possible to where it gives the bass a chance to find it. Now the next thing that I'm going to be looking for is something that is going to land softly, land quietly. Why do we want something that can land quietly? Well, if these fish are in 6 inches water and you plop a bait right on top of their head but you make a big splash, you're going to spook them. If they're 5 feet away from that bait, you're going to spook them. But if you land something softly, very naturally, then they're probably going to be like, oh, what's that? Looks like it could be food. Boom, you caught that fish. So in my experience, those are 2 of the things that are most important for these conditions. So what are some of my absolute favorite baits for these conditions? Now, the first and foremost, and this one is hard to beat in almost any situation, but in this situation, it is hands down, in my opinion, the best bait out there. And that is some form of stickworm or Senko style bait. Reason being is because it really checks those boxes better than any other bait out there. It lands incredibly quietly, and then on top of that, it just a very slow fall, and it stays in the strike zone super long. You can even just dead stick it out there. The thing about it is that's really a plus for me is that it's weedless. I mean, or you can make it weedless if necessary. So the fact of the matter is having something weedless when you're fishing less than 6 inches of water, there's likely going to be snags up there, so that's a huge plus as well. The next thing I'm going to say is pretty much any other weightless plastics are good in these situations, but something like a fluke or like a trick worm or any other floating worms can be great as well for the same exact reasons as the Senko. The next thing, switching gears here a little bit, is actually going to be a frog. Now, I can give you lots of little pointers on the frog, but essentially you can just cast it up there. You can pretty much cast it on the bank and work it slowly off. And the thing is you can just hard twitch these things to where they're basically walking the dog in place. Sometimes you may need to trim the skirt, whatever, but essentially that's going to stay in the strike zone for a very long time. It's going to look incredibly natural, and you're going to be able to land it very softly. Now, I will say you can definitely throw other top waters like a wake bait, buzz bait, whatever. But the thing with them is you're not going to be able to land them quite as quietly, and you're probably not going to be able to keep them in the strike zone as long. A popper could be a good one as well, but I personally would say that a frog is going to be your best bet in that situation. What colors of frogs would you want to throw? A black, a white, or maybe a green if you really want to. Regardless, that's pretty much what I had for you today. I hope you take these tips and you go out and blast on some. If you want to actually see me catch fish on a wacky rig in super shallow water, this is the exact conditions I'm talking about. You can actually click that video right there and it will hopefully show you a little bit better than I just explained. Regardless, you know what I'm saying next, right? Have yourself a fantastic weekend, and we'll catch you next time.